Structure does not come naturally to entrepreneurs typically. Process does not come naturally. We are not entrepreneurs because of those gifts. Those are our challenges, right? Saying to your clients, if you need anything at all, call me anytime, 24 hours a day. It's all about you. You're more important. My family always jokes how you're more important than my family and they wish I treated you. Stop having that talk track. It isn't helping anyone. It isn't necessary.
This works. I know this works. I've proven it with a dozen or 100 other people. If you do this 10 hours a week, you will generate sales.
Yeah. Well, what do I do next for lead generation? Is there something that I'm missing out there? The answer is probably yes.
You're listening to Copeland Morgan Media, your source for investment property analysis, education, and advice. Find us online at copelandmorgan.com. He's a certified professional behavioral analyst and a certified professional motivators analyst. He graduated from St. Leo with business management degree, and he's a 6-year Navy veteran. But before we dive deeper into Tom's story, I do want to remind everybody that today's episode is brought to you by Blanchard Insurance. If you're a Florida landlord, you already know that Florida is a challenging insurance market, and paying for the wrong insurance can be more costly than not having insurance at all. Florida landlords face not only property and casualty risk, but significant liability from personal injury and wrongful death claims. Learn how to protect your family's assets with a quick insurance checkup at BlanchardInsurance.com. And I got a quick plug there. I had Mike on the show recently. He's the owner of Blanchard Insurance. As many of you know, he's a friend of the show. And when he was on the show, it prompted me to follow up with his staff and update my umbrella policy. And not only did they help me with that, they saved me $6,000 per year on my auto policy. I have 2 drivers under 20 years old in my household right now, so you can imagine how much my insurance costs. But $6,000 a year is no joke, and that's for better coverage than I had before. So I'm thrilled that I made that call, and I can't say enough good things about Blanchard Insurance. Check them out at BlanchardInsurance.com. So Tom, welcome. With COVID and everything else that's been going on in the world, it has literally been years since we got together in person. It's good to see you. How have you been?
I have been fantastic. It is good to see you. I'm one of those rare people that never got the COVID. At least I don't believe I did. I mean, I was running with that story that I got it the February before.
Right.
For a while, maybe that was true, but never had it. So I guess I was one of the lesser impacted people. But there's still a need for training and coaching that hasn't gone away. And so I've been able to stay pretty busy.
Good deal. Well, I'm going to knock on wood here and say that I hope that we are truly on the tail end of the pandemic and things can slowly get back to at least some kind of new normal. But you're one of those people who is hard to introduce. You wear a lot of hats, but I think of you mostly as a coach. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by coach is you help people do whatever it is they do, but you help them do it more efficiently and more effectively. And a lot of your clients tend to be in real estate. Is that correct?
That is. I kind of fell into that, but that is the case.
How did you fall into real estate? That's got to be an interesting story.
Yeah, when I first started in consulting and training, I worked with an organization called Red Rock Leadership. Phenomenal. They're still in business here in Tampa. Jeff Ruby runs it. Phenomenal training organization. And they were asked by, he knew Dave Bennett at Pinellas Realtor Organization, CEO there, and they needed a speaker. And Jeff said, hey, I got this new guy. He's a good speaker. I'll send him over there and he'll talk real estate. So I don't know what I'm going to say about real estate. This was many years ago. And they were like, just give us a good sales talk. Get these young realtors fired up. The energy from that room of young agents, newer, they weren't all necessarily young, there was newer agents, was so motivational. And I was like, I want to do more in this organization. And just David and I really connected there. And working with brokers, working with new agents, working with veteran agents, seeing all the opportunity there to make a difference. It was significantly easier than a lot of the other consulting I was doing. And I just fell in love with working in the real estate market.
Awesome. And interestingly, that's how we met, was at a training that you were giving at PRO, which is the Pinellas Realtor Organization, our local board of realtors. So some of our listeners are probably wondering, hey, wait, this is a real estate podcast. We usually talk about real estate and 1031 exchanges and insurance and asset protection, all the things that go along with real estate. Why are we talking about coaching? But here's my take on it, and here's why I wanted you here in the studio. Most of our listeners are real estate investors. Mm-hmm. Many of them are real estate agents, and some of them are both investor agents. And many of them, we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, are still wearing those multiple hats. They have a full-time W-2 job, a high-paying career in some cases, along with their real estate side hustle. And then they've got, on top of that, school, kids, spouse, home, church, life in general. And I know how stressful it can be to try to keep all those plates in the air. And so one of the things I would love to dive in today with you is time management. For the folks that are out there who are trying to juggle all this stuff and build a real estate career on top of it, or a real estate investment portfolio on top of it, what are some tools they can use to do all of these things and to stay sane?
Yeah, great question. And I don't think that it's something that is unique in real estate. I think it's an entrepreneurial problem, and especially solopreneurs, or one-man bands. And there's a lot of mindset we could talk through as far as your time, of course, prioritization and things like that, making sure you're really working in the right direction and not just trying to sacrifice everything on the altar of one thing, because once we get there, everything else will fall into line. That's a typical entrepreneur mistake. We can talk a lot about that.
It's so easy to spin your wheels and get nothing done because there are so many distractions. There are so many little small things that seems urgent. Well, if I respond to this email right now, it'll take me 10 seconds.
Right.
If I leave it until tomorrow, it's going to take me a half hour just to find the damn thing. So yeah, I totally understand as an entrepreneur in any field, let alone somebody who has a full-time job and is also a real estate investor or a real estate agent. How do you stay focused on the income producing activities or the meaningful stuff?
Right. And so that, even if the mindset is right, and even if your goals are clear and you know what you want to do, and like I said, a lot of time could be spent on that. It would be very individual to each person listening. But there are some things people can do that are really simple that would apply to almost every situation, that saves you ridiculous amounts of time. And they're almost so simple that people go, I don't know why I never did that before. They're not common, especially in real estate. Real estate as an industry, there's just a lot of cultural things in there that they think they have to do as business people that their customers aren't even aware of. Only other agents are aware of it. It's like people always say,
let's dive into that. What are some of these things that we do that could be considered a waste of time? Yeah.
We've always done it that way. Do the customers even know? Because if they know, it could be weird. So things like appointments. Agents feel like they need to be ready to jump out the door at any minute to get somewhere. And I get that because it's like, the listing is hot, these opportunities don't come a lot. And that type of eagerness and initiative is always good. But the reality is that you can set an appointment. You really can. You can turn to somebody and say, I would love to meet you there as soon as possible. What's your next availability? Typically I do this on Thursdays between 12 and 4. Will that work for you? You can say that. Look, if they say no problem. Great, let's find it. Okay, I'll run out the door right now. But we've got to start managing our time at some sort of level of gatekeeping, which means you have to have an idea of how much time you're going to spend in each category. So you talk about business development. Do you have 2 hours on your calendar every single week dedicated to that you fight to protect? Meaning if someone calls you, that's not white space. That's business development. It won't happen. I won't grow without it. So the first thing I say is, can you meet after that? And if they can't and I got to move it, fine. But this idea, it's almost like a codependent mindset agents bring with them day one, a desperate sacrificial mindset has a lot of value, but it ends up, that's why I think most agents don't make it past 2 million.
Well, and I think that's a really fascinating comment about mindset and how we take ownership of our time or manage our time. Because if I call an attorney and say, hey, I would like you to work on my trust or my will, they're not going to say, hey, I'll come over right now. Are you available?
Exactly.
Can we meet at your house right? No, they're professionals. They value their time and they charge good money for their time. And so we're going to have to make an appointment and get on your calendar. It's the same with a physician. Even if you're sick, you can't get in to see them the same day sometimes. I mean, sometimes you can. I'm not knocking doctors. But for the most part, doctor's appointments are 2 weeks out. And so that's a fascinating observation. Why do we do that? We don't have to do that. Now, on the investor side, I can see times where maybe you should or you need to. Hey,
sure.
I want to sell my house. It's off market. I'm a desperate seller. Where are you right now? Let's talk turkey.
Well, the soonest is always going to be my goal.
Right.
I'm always going to try to be there the soonest available. I'm always going to be willing to move it around. And people that control their time can move things.
Right.
But If it's, well, I did this, so I couldn't do this, and we're okay with that. If you continue to be okay with that, you're going to limit your production unless you're just surrounded by great people and you fall into some great opportunities. Structure does not come naturally to entrepreneurs typically. Process does not come naturally. We are not entrepreneurs because of those gifts. Those are our challenges, right? And so you don't have to have a ton of it, but every agent has to have some protecting of the valuable things on their calendar, because without consistency, there's no success.
Sure. And that's a great point, that as soon as possible doesn't necessarily mean today.
Right.
Let's make an appointment for first thing tomorrow morning because I've got that time blocked out for sales calls or whatever the case may be.
And you have to be able to set appointments with yourself. So if you set an appointment with yourself to make sales calls, to make referral calls, to make FSBO calls, whatever you're trying to do, you make a 2-hour appointment for yourself. That can't be the easiest appointment to cancel. You cancel it 3 times, you'll always cancel it. No, it's like putting gym on your calendar and you just skip it every week, right? You just can't do that.
Have you been looking at my calendar?
Yeah. Why is it still there? So listen, if that's you, don't go, oh, I just need to be more disciplined and I'm going to just try harder next week. That's the mistake entrepreneurs make. It's going to be different this time. Instead, you need to look at it and be real with that. Okay, I never go to the gym when I say I'm going to. I never make the sales calls, but I know I need to. And sometimes all a coach does is confront that problem and force them to make some decisions. You don't need a coach for that, but you do need some ability to be honest with yourself and go, okay, what do I do? Well, if I can't change who I am to keep this appointment, then there has to be something else. And that's the little tricks of the trade. I'll share two real quick. Number one is, if you're going to cancel an appointment on yourself, then you need to make that appointment with someone else. Because I guarantee most agents don't cancel appointments they have with other people. Even if they're appointments they wish they hadn't made and didn't want to go to, we still go because we don't want to let people down. That's what we're good at. It's our strength. So leverage that. Make all your calls with an accountability partner. Get another agent and just say, we're going to meet every 2 weeks. Now, the minute that person starts enabling you to not do it, you fire them, right? I'm going to get someone else. You get a personal trainer. It's free. You just find another agent. We're going to sit down. We're going to make calls every week. You'll do it. That's all you need, because you won't cancel on them. They won't cancel on you. Number 2, you need to have a DDT, a day, date, and time. So what that is anytime you're having a conversation with someone you want to continue, potential referral opportunity, potential listing, potential buyer, potential anything, you put an appointment on the calendar. And if they're not ready to make that appointment yet, they're like, call me next week, follow me up with next week. No, let's put a 5-minute appointment on the calendar to have that touch base call. So you never chase anyone again. Meaning literally everything you're doing is an appointment. If it's not an appointment, it's not real. The DDT, the day, date, and time method, is the best thing I've ever seen agents do. Because what we have is a lot of hope. I want to call so-and-so. I got a lot of opportunity, a lot of optimism, a lot of potential. I just never get down to follow up and follow through. Well, guys, it's probably not going to change. You've probably been like that your whole life. That's why you're in real estate, because you want to be around people. You don't want to be doing follow-up, follow-through. So if those conversations started, there's something you want to continue, DDT, day, date, and time, your calendar and theirs right there. Even if it's just 5 minutes to touch base, never say I'm going to call you next week ever again.
That's so simple, but I think it's also so profound for a lot of people. Just put it on your calendar and
so
then
simple.
Live and die by your calendar. And that doesn't mean make it rigid. You can change it. It's your calendar after all. But just understand that if it's not on your calendar, it's probably not going to happen, because all these other distractions they're plentiful and they will pop up.
Yeah.
So I want to just clarify something, because I know we kind of talked around it, but I remember this from training that I did with you a few years ago. It's the concept of time blocking.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. I could spend all day, every day, doing nothing but talking on the phone or on Zoom with investor clients who want to learn more about the Tampa Bay area. They want to learn more about me. They want to learn more about our business. They're in Ohio or Chicago or New York or whatever, and they're doing research on the Tampa Bay area, and they want to talk real estate. I love to talk real estate, and part of me would love to do that all day long, but I learned very quickly that I can't just do that all day long. I have a business to run. I have clients to serve. And so what I started doing is I said, I will do that on Tuesdays and Thursdays between 1 p.m. and 5 p.m. And you can leverage the technology tools that are out there, such as Calendly and others. And I can literally say, oh, yeah, Tom, here's a link to my calendar. I do that on Tuesdays and Thursdays between 1 and 5. You pick a time that works for you. When they do, shows up on both our calendars. They get a nice email from me that says, hey, here's some stuff you should look at before we talk. And then after the meeting, they get a follow-up email from me. And all this stuff is automated, and it's so powerful. So I want to talk about the concept of time blocking, because that's something that I learned from you. And then I want to talk about some of these tools that are available to help you do it, help you to like sort of give it superpower.
Yeah. So time blocking means a lot of things, different things to different people. My method of time blocking is sourced more in an organization called Strategic Coach. So Strategic Coach is kind of like a coach to high-end business owners. They have a lot of good free stuff on YouTube. It's worth checking out. Dan Sullivan of Strategic Coach uses a different method of time blocking. He doesn't block mow the grass, go to the gym, walk the dog kind of stuff on his calendar. And I have found that doesn't really work, especially for entrepreneurs. That works for engineers, blocking every 15 minutes or whatever. We'll throw the baby out with the bathwater the first appointment we miss. So what really works is what he does is more momentum blocking. So it's like 4 hours of business building stuff, 4 hours of admin, 4 hours of rest. And so whatever ends up in those categories, that's what you were going to do. That was a type of activity. It works really well if and only if you can protect your time. You have to understand that your unique abilities you're using during that time is very, very helpful and necessary. And so the challenge I think we have as entrepreneurs is we don't typically have that discipline. We love those methods as long as we know everything else is taken care of. But the fire that's burning the most hot, which is whatever client needs whatever from us, is what we're going to focus on. And we just don't get around to the other stuff. And what we don't understand is that there are breaks you can put in place there that will absolutely free you up. And it's not that hard. But if you don't have any discipline to do it at all, you have to do what I call true accountability. It's not just accountability. You're going to have a coach every week that's going to ask you if you did or not and be upset if you didn't. I mean, you have to have something in place there where you can't get out of it. For example, I have an admin appointment on my calendar every single Monday. I cannot miss. Right? If I miss that admin appointment, there's going to be a lot of disappointed people because there's a report that goes out at the end of that I didn't want to have to send, but I knew if I didn't have that report, I would always procrastinate this admin. So I committed myself to something because guess what? When I'm committed to other people, I follow through. It's little tricks like that really work.
That's a great point. So for somebody who's sitting at home saying, oh my God, you're speaking my language, I need this. I need somebody to help me develop some structure. How do they find this stuff or resources about this stuff on your website? How do they find you if they want to have a deeper dive? You said a lot of this stuff is very personalized. So how do they get you to help them set up their calendar or their time blocks? I mean, what's the next step for somebody who wants to dive into this? And
I feel like I'm the anti-coach real estate coach. Like, don't hire a coach. It's the worst decision you could ever make. I feel like I say that more often than I say hire a coach. Because I don't think we have good expectations of what we think a coach is going to be training wheels, like a personal trainer. We think a personal trainer is going to get us out of bed in the morning, drag us to the gym, work out with us. You go to a personal trainer, you make some gains for 6 months, and then you realize that the personal trainer turns to you and says, well, 80% of this is done in the kitchen. You go, well, crap, now I need a personal chef too. You come and you start to realize what it really comes down to is you have unique abilities. You have the things you're good at. You have the things you need to be doing. But as an entrepreneur, you have to do the other crap too. So I call the other crap work. And I call all the stuff that I want to do and I'm good at doing, I call that play. And I work up to 4 hours a day. So to me, the 4-hour workday is a concept that doesn't work in reality because I want to work more than 4 hours. But I don't want to do the work I don't want to do. So I just call that work. And I have a 4-hour workday at most. And so all that stuff, people say, well, do it first. Well, I don't necessarily always do it first, but I make sure I do it before I do the stuff I want to do, unless I have to, unless the timing is just impossible. So for example, for me, it's accounting. It's cold calls. I hate making sales calls. I don't have to make as many as I used to, but I still got to make them every once in a while. It's the admin I don't want to do. All that stuff I have to get done, and I can't hire it out. It's better for me to do it when I manage my time. One of the biggest mistakes I see entrepreneurs and real estate agents especially making is they think they got to spend money to make money. We'll talk about this when we talk about lead gen too. If you're selling under $6 million in real estate a year, you probably have more margin than you realize. You might not want to do things, but you really can't afford to not do them yourself. And this idea of, I'm going to go out and hire a social media manager and I haven't sold $1 million in real estate yet. I'm going to go out and do all this stuff. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I think a lot of agents die on the vine in poor strategic thinking, consumed by vendors that want to sell them every coaching program, every little help that they need. And they haven't even learned how to walk yet. So I would say don't hire a coach until you've reached a ceiling or have a ton of money and just want to have a shortened learning curve. Sure. And I've had lots of those clients. I mean, you were kind of that. I don't know how much I really did for you, but tell you you're on the right track and maybe give you a few tips.
Sure.
But you weren't at a ceiling yet, but you were organized. If you were to have been disorganized, could have spent a lot more time, helped you get organized, sure, but why waste a lot of money on that? Just put in the time it's going to take.
I think a perfect example or corollary to that is there's a lot of agents that say, oh, you got to hire a transaction coordinator. You got to hire somebody to dot all your paperwork, cross all the T's and dot all the I's and check all this stuff. And I could never wrap my head around that because I'm like, no, I'm just going to build a system, a checklist with all these forms and an e-signature platform. And as soon as they're signed, they're done. That's all of my stuff is already buttoned up. And this was at the time I was at another brokerage, and I could literally just kind of hand in my file, and the file was already the checklist. And so I'm like, why would I need to pay somebody $500 to do this for every transaction when you can just sort of automate it?
Well, but not everybody's you. So the danger is I think a lot of entrepreneurs think they can be you. I think a lot of agents go, I'm going to do what Jeff does. That makes sense. But you have an outside the box approach to things. You came from other industries. You had other professional experience. You looked at a lot of things that happen in real estate and said, I don't know why we do it that way. It doesn't make any sense. And you fixed it. That's why I exist too, because I feel the same way about some of these things. Not that they're always doing it for bad reasons. Sometimes I learn later, well, there's a reason why they always did that. I should have known. But when things like you're talking about there, I think that a lot of folks don't do that because they're just not wired like you. You're very unique in that. And so I would say a transaction coordinator would be the first hire I would recommend if you're bad at it or you've reached a ceiling and you need to get rid of that. But again, if you're not already selling $2 million at least in real estate, I don't know you've done enough transactions that you would understand what that transaction coordinator is doing. There's a lot of bad transaction coordinators out there. And so, if you know the transaction well, you've had your bad at, you know now it's not your best ball of wax to be messing with, and you get to 2 and you can afford it and you have capacity, fine. But you should be able to prove that plan to me, to you, to a friend, to a bank. And a lot of times agents jump in, right? It's an entrepreneurial gift. We're assertive. And we jump in and go, I'm going to go hire a transaction coordinator today. We spend the whole day calling transaction coordinators and we find them, this is going to solve my time management issue. And a weekend goes by and then we're into another week and then we put it on a back burner because we actually got some business. Then we come back to the transaction coordinator and idea again. Then we finally hire one. Now we're spending all the time onboarding and we didn't think about that. And that type of mess.
Yeah, there's an important underlying question there, and it's how many transactions are you doing?
Yeah.
Because if it's 5 per year, you probably have the time and the capacity and the ability to do some of that stuff yourself. And that week or 2 that you spent on the whole process of finding and hiring and onboarding a transaction coordinator could have been spent developing new business and building up your real estate income.
But I don't think that it naturally, for just again because of the gifts and the strengths of most agents, they don't naturally go, let me sit back and think about that. Let me compare that to my annual plan. Let me look at my budget numbers and see if that's in line. Let me see if that works with my forecasts. Well, and they don't have those things.
That's something I wanted to touch on because you've mentioned a few times these checkpoints or levels. Are you selling $2 million? Are you selling $6 million? And I would venture to guess that if I asked a room full of 12, real estate agents, how much real estate did you sell last year? How much are you on track to sell this year? 8 of them would say, I have no idea. I guess I could look it up in the MLS, but it's like you're not going to hit a target that you're not aiming for. And so I think having that sit down and having somebody walk you through it is incredibly valuable.
It can, and they've got to. We all have to have somewhat of a plan, and the plan, it does not have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be incredibly detailed, but it's not just how much do you want to make and what's it going to take to get there. The bigger question, and the one that I think unfortunately most coaches don't focus on, is what is really your true capacity? Look, I can run. If you were chasing me, I could easily run probably a 10K right now. Okay. But the reality is that if I have to run, I'm running a 10K in May. If I have to run a 10K in May, in the structures I have, the fact that I could do it right now does not mean I could do it 3 times this week without causing damage. you really cannot jump into time and go from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. You just can't do it. The problem is it's our desire, optimism to do that is oftentimes the motivation for most entrepreneurs. So we jump in, we're impulsive, we're excited, we're motivated, we go out the gate at 60 miles an hour, but we lack consistency. We find real estate agents broken down on the side of the road the whole way down the interstate, right? Like, we should start a towing company. Well, that's what I did. That's why I started getting real estate coaching, because I kept finding them broken down the side of the road. Why? Your car's fine. What's wrong? I ran out of gas.
Right.
The car's fine. Well, why'd you run out of gas? I didn't think it was going to burn the gas this fast. Well, if all real estate was a matter of sprints, we'd be fine. And we try to make it that way, but we know there's something missing, right? It's called consistency. How do I get to a place where I have a long game? Going and hiring someone is probably a good decision, but it has to be timed right. We have to understand our own capacity. And if we're already not being truly honest with ourselves about our own capacity, our own abilities, and we're going to go hire and manage someone, we're not in a good place to do that. It's the blind leading the blind. So what we really want to do is understand what my ramp up's going to be. And unfortunately, it can be demotivating to a lot of agents. Well, I really wanted to do a lot more than that. I really want more. And that's why I don't take on a lot of people.
That's a great point. And that concept of capacity, I think, is crucial, especially for the folks who are still working a 40 or 50 hour job for the man and trying to build up real estate on the side. I think you have to be realistic about your capacity and about how many hours there are in the week for you to do this stuff. That's not to say that you can't be successful, but you have to be very strategic about it. And I think you absolutely have to have some time management built in there. And so I guess, what advice would you give to somebody who's still working full time but still trying to establish a real estate career? That's a lot to juggle.
Probably a lot of them shouldn't be doing it. Because I've had that a lot, because I do so much of the new member to the board, coaching and speaking. So I talk to a lot of those folks, and I get asked that question quite often, actually. And my question back is always, well, what other thing are you doing? Is that other thing you're doing giving you a list of people who know, like, and trust you? So, for example, one of my most successful clients I ever coached, he used to be in the mortgage industry. So when he came into real estate, he already had a list of like 500 people who'd done transactions with him. He knew them on this level. It was very quick to make a bunch of phone calls. So yeah, you're probably in a good place to go ahead and start making those calls. It's in line. Or they come from a very similar industry, right? Or they were in real estate, but they were just in a different part of real estate. And so, it could be things like that. But if you're working at the daycare, and you know some people, you've got a good natural network, but you're trying to slowly do a transaction here for your mom, transaction here for an uncle, transaction, kind of just trying to do that to build a business. I think it's going to be harder. So I don't have great advice exactly what I would do there. I think it would be very situational, but I would say you need to put the point in the calendar when you're going to make the conversion. You need to commit to that before you start. So don't do it. That's the problem, is we say, well, I'll do it when I feel a certain way. And that feeling's changed by the second. And so what you really want to say is, like, when I sell 5 transactions, I will do this full time, and have a plan in place, whether it's savings. Honestly, I hate to say this. I feel like my dad here, but the best thing I could tell them is save money.
Sure. Well, yeah, when new agents join our team, I try to have that conversation with them and explain that, look, if you need that next commission check to feed your family, or to make your car payment, or to put gas in your car, this is a tough row to hoe. It's going to take you some time to there's an on-ramp, which is, I think, the term that you use, and you need to understand what that on-ramp is and how long it takes and how it works. And all the mindset in the world won't get you to the top of the on-ramp. It takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
I tell brokers, don't take those people on unless you look at them and they have a work ethic that intimidates you.
Sure.
So I would hire you fresh out of whatever because you have a crazy work ethic. But I don't find that that's usually what attracts people to real estate. What attracts people to real estate is freedom. It's networking. It's the joy of the industry. It's just a wonderful thing to work in. And you can make money at it too. And that's kind of the danger, is it attracts people, but it also gives them almost sometimes a false hope of you're going to be really wheeling and dealing.
Yeah, it attracts a lot of dreamers.
It does. And that's, I think, why the industry is so exciting and why I like working in it, because I'm a dreamer. But the reality is, and I'm not trying to kill any dreams, but the reality is that that motivation is temporary. The work ethic, the discipline, the consistency that's needed there, if that's not your gift, doesn't mean you shouldn't go into the industry, doesn't mean you can't be successful. Well, you want to talk about time management? we got to talk about is what's your accountability? How much money do you have there? Are you going to buy some of the help that you need? But mainly, what's a plan and how can you prove it to me that it's going to be consistent? Would a bank give you money on this because they know they're going to get their money back? And if the answer is no, you're probably not ready yet. It's not that you shouldn't do it. It's just you're not ready yet. And I think we jump in and learn that, and that's the problem.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point, that banks want to see 2 years of sustained performance in whatever it is that you're doing. And so I think you need to be very realistic about this 2-year timeline as a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, a real estate agent, or whatever, and have a plan to get to the top of that on-ramp within a couple of years.
Yeah, that plan is vital. And that plan is what throws people. They go, well, I have a plan. Well, can we compare this to some sort of template or something? What is the plan? Because when we talked about calendars earlier, that's what I want to see. I want to see if you brought your plan from goals to strategy to calendar. Can I look at your calendar and see what you're going to do this week, how frequently you're going to do it, and what result you're hoping to get from that? You might not have enough data yet. Have you spent, like you said, have you spent 6 months, so if you are working part-time, have you spent 6 months at least doing that experiment where you come back and say, well, I got this much data. And so I don't usually work with people that haven't done that. I've had some people that I have taken on because they are exceptions to the rule. I cheat. I just only work with people that I know will win. I had one recently. His name is Joe. I don't think he'll mind me calling him out. I think he's got a podcast. He's just started doing too. And Joe, he was just rare. He's just one of those guys that would put in 40 hours a week if I told him to take the week off. And so that's not me, and that's not everyone. And so if that's not you, you're going to need a better plan. That's going to be an honest plan to your capacity. And I always want to look at how hard have you worked and how recently was that. I'm not going to go back in the gym and be 19. And for a lot of agents, hopefully their last job was a tough one.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And so many people come into real estate because they want freedom, whether it's freedom of their time, financial freedom, both. But the irony is there's freedom in structure.
Yeah.
And so building out some of these structures, I think, is where someone like you can be just incredibly valuable, because you've been there, you've done that, you've helped hundreds of other people who have been there and done that and been successful, and you've got a data-driven approach to it. Well, this tends to work, this tends to not work. These traits and trends are good for you, and you might want to think about this because I can tell that you're one of these types of people, and so.
Yeah, that part is important.
If we're speaking your language out there, go to strongholdtraining.com and get in touch with Thom and get some of this structure in place, because there's freedom in that structure. And if that's what you seek, you got to put in the work.
Yeah, I love that. Go to strongholdtraining.com, book a call. So Thom can tell you he won't work with you because you don't have work ethic. It sounds so bad. It doesn't. I'll help you for 15 minutes, no matter what. No, and I don't mean to sound arrogant in that. I just want to be very realistic. Is that just because if those are obstacles, you're going, man, that's me. I don't want you to think like get out of the game at all. Just be honest about that. It's really just being honest. I mean, a lot of times a coach is just the person that's honest with you, and a lot of coaches aren't honest with you, unfortunately. But you just have to have a real realistic view of what that capacity can be, and recognize it may take some time to get up there. So if I'm trying to feed the kids on this, I need to be prepared for that long game, especially right now.
Sure. And yeah, I think in any line of work, especially as an entrepreneur, you have to be, I think there's a lesson in what you just said. You have to be cautious about which clients you take on.
Yeah.
Because if you're a real estate agent, you're not going to be financially successful selling $50,000 flip houses in Detroit.
Yeah.
You have to find a niche and become an expert in your niche, and make sure that you're not wasting time on the tire kickers and the clients who aren't going to bring you any type of financial any money.
And
focus on income producing activity,
which is a good transition. I know we're going to talk a little bit about that, how to make more money, but let's just go back real quick to the structure thing. So you had mentioned, like, it's not a one size fits all structure. And I think agents need to be careful about that. Investors need to be careful of that big time. We want to glean from all the different structures, but you really do need a structure that works with your strengths. And what we tend to do as entrepreneurs is we go, well, my problem is time management, or my problem is accounting, my problem is transactions. I'm just going to go buy a program that's going to fix me. I'm going to buy a coach. I'm going to watch a training. I'm going to do something that's going to fix me. Instead of going, I don't want to do that. It's not my strength. this is my strength. I need to make sure I'm leveraging this tremendously. And whatever structure I need to bring in can't involve me changing to the structure. The structure has got to adapt to you. It must adapt. I wish it wasn't that way. I wish we could change you with a program, but we can't. I've coached a lot of people using programs they bought. They went and bought Ninja Selling. They went and bought whatever. And they were all great programs, but they're like, I just can't keep up with the program. I'm like, you're not working a job. You're not working a purpose. You're working a program. Well, we need the program to work for you. And it's okay to be honest and say, I just can't really do more than 6 hours a day. Well, then let's make that 6 hours the best 6 hours ever. But stop saying, well, my problem is I'm just not getting up early enough. And until that changes, I'll never work. That's overachiever mindset. If we don't do it perfect, we don't do it as well as we thought we could, we end up not doing it, we lose consistency. You want consistency? Be rigorously honest with yourself.
Yeah, that's a great point, because you can buy all the tools in the world, but if they're not a good fit for you and your personality and your traits, then it's a waste of money. You have to find something that works for you, and that's not going to be the same thing that works for you. For me, it's everybody's different.
And good coaches are less systematic for that reason, I think. As just an opinion, I'm biased for sure about coaches. I'm very critical about other coaches. They don't take me to dinner very often. I would just say that if someone has a system and they're just going to keep putting you through that system, be careful. A coach should really say, yeah, I've got a system, or I'll use whatever system you have, or I can use anybody's system. I'm going to help you apply that to you. And that's sometimes the best thing you can get out of any relationship with a mentor or coach.
Yeah, don't buy the system, buy the customized plan for you.
Absolutely.
Before we move on, this was kind of our time management segment, but and we touched on it briefly, and then we kind of went off on a tangent, which was a great tangent. But time management tools. I mean, obviously, everybody's got their calendar, Google Calendar or whatever. I mentioned Calendly, which I love. Which, if you're not familiar with it, you can kind of, and you really have to take the time to customize it. But you can set it up so that people have access to your calendar at certain times for certain amounts of time with certain buffers and all kinds of tweaks. But allow people to make appointments, and then it's a mutual appointment on your shared calendars. I found that to be just an incredibly powerful and cheap. I think there's a free version tool. But you working in this space, I'm wondering, what else is out there? Well, what should people look into if they're struggling with time management?
Yeah, that's a great question. Calendly is a must. A calendar is a must. A calendar where you can send appointments is a must. And if you've never sent someone a Google Calendar invite, even in the real estate industry, it's definitely a recommendation. If your client doesn't use a Google Calendar, you send them the invite anyway. Sending and receiving calendar invites is necessary for professional business, in my opinion.
And that's a great point, because there are still people out there that write everything down in their binder, their what do they call it, the planner. And that planner is not shared with anybody else. So.
And they're texting people. And one of the things that I think is the best form of time management is that DDT I was mentioning earlier, where you make a day, date, and time appointment with everybody that you want to continue having a conversation with. So if you were after this said, hey, Tom, that was great, let's get lunch sometime. No. Let's set an appointment now. Well, I don't know when I'm going to be free.
Sometime is never.
Oh, you go, well, Tom, I don't know if I'm going to be free soon. Okay, no problem. Well, we'll set let's set an appointment so we can call each other in 2 weeks. Oh, well, I was just saying it to be nice. Okay, well, now we're not going to do it then, are we? And that's, so what I call, I think the best form of time management any agent can have is what I call a standing DDT. So when you get a new listing, you go, hey, you're going to have lots of questions. Why don't we set a standing appointment every week? So Wednesday evenings, are you home? Great. 6 to 6:30 every week, we're going to call each other. If we got stuff to discuss or review the listing process, we'll do it. If we don't, no big deal, it'll be a shorter call, but let's have that standing appointment. If anything comes up between Wednesdays, of course you're free to call me. But if not, or if for any reason you're not sure if you could get me or whatever, you don't have to leave a voicemail, play phone tag, we've got the Wednesday there for that reason. That saves probably about 2 hours a day for busy agents right off the cuff.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, because most people are savvy enough to know that, well, this is not an emergency. This is not urgent. This can wait until Wednesday.
Yeah.
And so what that eliminates is the 17 calls you would have got on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday morning asking you about stuff that could have just waited for that half-hour block of time that you already have on your calendar. And it's so simple. But so many people don't take advantage of managing their time like that.
But professional salespeople in other industries have been doing that for years, because it's the only thing that's effective. And so, you have to have that. And so it's the first thing I give to any client I coach right away, to say, I don't know what we're going to talk about, but you're going to start implementing the standing DDT. because I need them to have capacity. They can't be running around canceling dinner on their family so that they can, call all these people back that have been blowing them up all day for non-emergency issues. And you sound so overly excited, overly busy, overly stressed when you make those calls. Where standing appointment, you're always in control. It's structured. People feel safe. They feel like they can trust you. Saying to your clients, if you need anything at all, call me anytime, 24 hours a day. It's all about you. You're more important. My family always jokes how you're more important than my family and they wish I treated you. Stop having that talk track. It isn't helping anyone. It isn't necessary.
Most people don't even want to hear that. They want you to be a professional.
Yeah, it doesn't help anything. As a matter of fact, you do that in any other field as a salesperson and people smell sales on you and no one wants to be that way. Just say, hey, I typically set a standing appointment. And that honestly is the greatest time management tool most agents could implement today.
That tip alone was worth the podcast episode.
So you still have to pay me. He doesn't pay me.
One other thing that this reminds me of, and I don't think I got this tip from you. I think I read it somewhere. And I admit it won't work for everybody. It's a hard thing to do. But I stopped answering the phone about 3 or 4 years ago, and it was the best thing I ever did. Yeah. If you call me, you'll get an answering service. They'll say, hey, this is Copel Morgan. What can we do for you? You're like, oh, I needed to talk to Jeff. Okay, who's this? What's your name? What's your number? Okay, I'll give him the message. And I'll call him back in 5-10 minutes, or I'll call him back when I get a chance to catch my breath. People who know me, you could shoot me a text and, hey, Jeff, can you give me a call?
Sure.
And so that's sort of my inside line is text me. But if you call me, you will not get me on the phone. And I know so many real estate agents feel like they have to answer. It doesn't matter if it's 2 a.m. Oh, it could be a sales lead. I got to answer. No, you don't have to answer that. Let somebody else pick up and take the message for you. And so
that's a great tip. I
that's
also
something
don't
that works for me, and I know it doesn't work for everybody, but I think it's along those same lines of
it's a good
control
advice.
Your time.
I have an answering service. I do use it for the. I don't keep them online all the time, but it's like something I can put online
exactly.
at any time.
You can turn it on or off, but I gradually just
what I do
towards leaving it on all the time.
I've recommended that to many clients, and I'll tell you the only recommendation I've now added to that, the caveat is, get rid of all your spam calls first. Don't let them answer your spam calls because they'll charge you for it a lot of times. Well, at least the service I use is very inexpensive because they only charge me per answered call, and the call has to be more than like 10 seconds or something. And they're very, very good. I don't remember the name now, but I can just hit a couple of buttons on my phone and it moves it over and it's good. But for a while there, I was like, well, I don't know if I'm really paying for any calls, spam calls or whatever, things like that. So I cleared all that out, and then I realized I don't get as many calls as I thought I was getting at that time. Most people find me other ways.
But again, if you talk to a dozen real estate agents, I bet all 12 of them would tell you, oh, I spend like 20 hours a week on the phone. Yeah. Well, imagine if you could free up 20 hours per week just by letting somebody else answer your phone. And it's not expensive, $50 a month maybe to start, depending on your call volume. Yeah. And honestly, the higher your call volume, the more valuable it is to you. So
yeah, no, I think that's great.
So you mentioned this earlier, but let's dive in and talk about lead generation and sales. Whether you're a real estate investor trying to find deals, or whether you're a real estate agent trying to find new clients to work with, or whether you're just any type of entrepreneur, you're a doctor, a lawyer, whatever, lead generation and sales, having a pipeline for that is the lifeblood of your business. Without sales leads, you will not make any money. And so it's crucial whether you realize it or not. And some people are almost surprised by it. Oh, you mean I've got to figure out ways to generate leads and develop leads into prospects and prospects into sales? It's obvious to some, and then some are oblivious to the process. So what are some tools, training, opportunities, words of wisdom that you can share on that front?
Yeah, I think the first thing, whether you've been doing this a long time or you're new at it, I really think that lead generation is best done in looking at history. We can really learn from history. I think a lot of us, unfortunately, approach lead generation of what's the hottest trend? Where are all the leads coming from today?
TikTok. I got a TikTok video.
Going to make some TikTok videos, embarrass myself in front of the grandkids, and that's going to get me some leads. And let's just see what happens. And that's fun. And again, that's our gift as entrepreneurs. We'll jump in. We'll learn anything. We're creative. We enjoy that. It motivates us. And you should be doing those types of fun experimental things.
For the record, I am not on TikTok.
Yet. So I am also not on TikTok for other reasons. But it's one of those things that, I don't have any social media on my phone. That's what people are like, what are the reasons? I don't have any social media on my phone. I have accounts, and I put it on my calendar when I'm going to do social media time. But I'm a little bit crazy on the calendar stuff, probably.
To be expected.
To be expected. I'm a victim of my own processes. That said, you should have that time set aside to try the different marketing crazy things, everything you could think of. You should fit that into your experiments, and you should track it and treat it like an experiment where you're gauging it and doing data and figuring out if there's any merit here before you make a commitment or go in bigger. But the rest of your lead generation needs to be something that's repeatable, right? That can be consistent, that has historical value, meaning like other agents have done this successfully. I can learn from it. I don't have to like reinvent the wheel. And you should understand the time and money involved to be successful. And if you don't know those things, well, let's spend your first couple of years learning them, learning what works for you and plays with your strengths. But the important thing is to kind of stay in that lead gen mode. We don't want to be every year looks like a different lead gen, a different marketing plan. Does that make sense? So lead generation is oftentimes a challenge for us because we're motivated and we're excited about the new and shiny. And I think you should chase the new and shiny. I think it's fun. But again, you have to be, okay, how much am I going to do that? Is that going to be an hour a week? I'm going to play with am I going to go into the lab? That's what I call it. I say going into the lab. So I love marketing. I geek out on marketing. I was actually glad that you didn't want to talk a ton about marketing because I was like, I'll geek out and tangent and it'll be over, right? So I train my clients to do Facebook ads and stuff like that. I love that stuff. I've done it for free so many times because I just like doing it. The fact of the matter is, though, is that you can spend weeks on that, get into training programs. You could lose quarters. You could lose half a year learning how to do that, and it never amounts to anything. But you have a new skill, and that's why entrepreneurs have so many random skills, because we do that. That's great. Do that in the lab. It's 2 hours on a Friday, right? For me, it's 4. It's 4 hours on a Friday. It's what I'm doing after this, right? I'm going into the lab. I'm going to play with all the stuff I want to be playing with. I'm going to flirt with all the crazy ideas, all the crazy business ideas, all the fun stuff I want to explore, all the new CRMs I want to research, whatever. That's what I do there. The rest of the week, all the lead generation is stuff that's proven to work. Stuff I'm tracking and tweaking. It's sometimes boring. It's the calls I don't want to make, but I know I have to do it. Real estate has historical things that work. Guys, open houses work. If open houses aren't working for you, it's probably the way you're doing your open house, right? Strategic partnerships work. Having lawyers and accountants and other people in the trade that can send you business, it works. It makes sense to make those connections. Networking works. You have to do it the right way. There are some tricks to it for sure to tweak it and make it better. Some that are really important and not commonly known, but the fact of the matter is that does work. But it doesn't mean you go networking once in a while. You can't go with huge expectations. You're going to meet 5 important people at every networking event. It's a long game. It's a long game you have to commit to doing. You have to track what you're doing. You have to tweak what you're doing. You have to be your own sales manager. But people that are successful, even if they're not doing all the tracking and tweaking I think they should do, people that are successful tend to be consistent. They have the strategic partnerships. They've got the memberships in the right networking groups. They're doing the right things. They've built up enough of a referral network that they're calling those people. They're nurturing them. They have some sort of group that they're all meeting up, and they're doing something to constantly nurture the one pool instead of doing 50 things that changes every year. I get calls all the time. Should I do a mailer? Have you ever done a mailer? No. What else are you doing right now that's working? Nothing. I don't think the question is, should I do a mailer? I think the question is, what's our marketing plan for the year? So
that's a great point, and that probably leans also or applies equally to the investor side. There's so many people out there that are taught, send out the yellow letter or the postcard to the infamous, distressed seller to find these off-market deals, and you can be wildly successful if you have $100,000 to spend on direct mail because it's a very, very low response rate.
Yeah.
But if you're not tracking it. I told somebody this the other day. If you spent $10 on marketing and you made $14 in return, what should you do? Spend $20 on marketing, and then you'd make $28 in return.
Absolutely, spend as much as humanly possible.
But if you're not tracking this stuff, you won't know. And there's so many people, investors and agents included, that'll, I think I'm going to do a mailer today. I'm guilty of it. I've gone on Vistaprint and designed my postcard, and so I'll spend $1,000 on postcards, and you get a few calls here and there. Maybe you get a deal out of it, and so maybe it was a net positive. I don't know. I didn't track it that closely. But what I didn't do was figure out, well, should I be spending $1,000 every month or every quarter?
Right, there you
know,
go.
what was my ROI, and should I keep doing that, or was it a total waste of money? I honestly, I couldn't tell you right now, but I know I've done some mailers in the last couple of years, and I didn't do them correctly.
And I think that's okay. I think it's okay if every once in a while you're doing stuff like that. That's lab stuff. I think that's fun, you know. And so when you're motivated to do that, okay, great. Let's see where we can work that into the plan. But we're going to have to spend the limited time and the capacity until you grow your capacity on what you're doing. And this isn't just for new agents, even veteran agents that maybe hit a ceiling or have hit a lull, or they're having to change because the market's changed, or whatever it is. You has to be a consistent kind of track. Probably, and I think you were told me you may ask me this later, but I'm going to answer it now. You know, one of the best pieces of advice I ever received was from my old mentor, Jeff Ruby, who got me into the consulting business at Red Rock Leadership. You know, he would always tell me, stay the course. And I hated that because I didn't want to be on exactly the same course he was on. He was doing some stuff. I thought I had innovation. And I did. You know, I did get us into some marketing and some stuff that was pretty innovative. But staying the course was why he had been in business in so long and why he had made the money he had that allowed him to hire me. If you have found you've never really hit that mark that you intended to, you always have felt like there was some mark, whether it was, you know, for a lot of people, it's a 6-figure income. For a lot of people, it's $300,000 a year, whatever it is. You have this mark. You're like, why have I never really quite reached that mark? Where have you been inconsistent? How many millions of things have you tried? The issue might not be you never came up on the right thing. It's that the things you were actually probably going to be good at or were good at, you didn't focus on exclusively, consistently, and then minimalize like 2 hours a week in the lab stuff. Sometimes it's just a simple tweak like that.
Yeah, focus on what works and cut out the fluff.
And if you don't know what works, focus on something until it does, or you can prove it fails, and you need to have those metrics before you start, or else it'll be emotionally led.
And so I'm assuming you can help people figure out how to track their metrics for different types of marketing approaches. I'm assuming that's one of the things that you offer.
Yeah, that's what I do. Yeah.
And I can't overstress how powerful that can be, because if you've got $1,000 to spend on marketing and you've got 50 different things you could spend it on, you know, do you spend, you know, a few dollars each on all 50? Do you focus on, you know, spend half your money on one thing and dabble in the other?
Yeah.
If you're starting from scratch and you have no idea how to allocate your marketing budget, you know, it would be worth the cost of a coaching session just to hear you say, well, this works. I know this works. I've proven it with a dozen or 100 other people. If you do this 10 hours a week, you will generate sales.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, dabble with the other fun stuff, you know, on a Friday afternoon. And if it works, then start putting more resources into that. But if
you need to do it. It's
fun. If
you're
just going about it randomly, you're probably wasting your money and wasting your time and not getting any return on investment, or at least you wouldn't know if you're not tracking it. So how would you?
And I don't want to just speak to the people that are in that mode or struggling with that. You know, just take someone who's a little bit more structured. They've been doing it a little longer. Maybe they have some of that. And they're going, well, what do I do next for lead generation? You know, is there something that I'm missing out there? The answer is probably yes. There probably is. But a lot of times the thing we look to try is the thing that doesn't really suit us, because we think that's what I'm missing. I'm missing that side. But it's almost never the case. The reason why I did well in internet marketing, Facebook marketing, is because I'm good at that stuff and I enjoy the heck out of it. You know, I did better at that than I did cold calling. You know, I just didn't feel like myself as much. I know how to cold call. I can teach people to cold call. I still occasionally do it, but it didn't make any sense. It made sense for me to do what I was good at, but I've had people tell me I hate cold calling. I'm going to learn Facebook advertising. They don't even know how to make a Facebook business account. They're so far out from being successful at that. They're they have more bad things to say about social media than good things. Like, you should probably try cold calling. You know, it still really works.
Yeah, but that is a great point, because there's people on the other side of the spectrum who are like, oh, I love talking on the phone. I would make 100 phone calls to strangers today, just for fun, if I could.
Yeah,
and that's certainly not me.
Right.
But that person can turn that trait into a $1 million income stream if they focus on it and track it.
If they focus
the other person who can't stand talking on the phone, or, you know, just can't bring themselves to make a single cold call, probably not something they should focus on. I mean, they may need to learn how to do it, like you said, but that may not be your primary emphasis when it comes to marketing.
Yeah, and I think that was the biggest challenge is that people realize that, and then they set out to do it. Like, okay, yep, I understand that, Jeff. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do some cold calling. And they go, you know, I'm going to make 100 calls a day, And I figured out that if I make 100 calls, I'll probably talk to 30 people. And if I talk to 30 people, I'll probably have 10 like meaningful conversations. And from that, I'll probably set like 5 appointments. And that's probably more than planning than a lot of people do. And they start calling and they make 100 calls and they set 12 appointments and they're super excited and they never make 100 phone calls again because it's just too many phone calls.
Right.
But that's the kind of stuff I talk about, a capacity. It's like setting out to run a 10K. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. I want you to make 5 phone calls. I told a client to make 5 phone calls one time, and the broker got on to me for it. They're like, why are you telling my people to only make 5 phone calls? I said, because they've never made 1. And 5.
Yeah, that's a 500% increase.
It's huge. I say, I want them to make 5 because I want to find out why that's hard for them. I want them to get honest about it. And a lot of times we buy programs that we never start for this very reason. And so I'm a big believer in people. I think you empower people, you get their obstacles out of the way, you leverage their strengths, and people succeed. It's just we have a hard time doing that for ourselves. And then really that's all coaches really do is they can see that. But unfortunately, most coaches want to scale. So they bring programs, they run you through the program. It's not a coaching relationship. They give coaching a bad name. It's a program. What we're doing right now is coaching.
Sure. So it's hard to talk about lead generation without talking about CRMs.
Yeah.
My mind just went blank. I'm going to edit this part out.
You need a couple of names? Copper.
No, I was trying to, believe it or not, I'm trying to think of the acronym.
Customer relationship management. You shouldn't cut that out. You need more humor. I haven't told enough jokes yet.
Maybe I'll just leave it. So you can't talk about lead generation without talking about CRMs, your database that you use for customer relationship management. There are no less than 1,000 CRMs out there, and they range from free to $1,000 a month. For a real estate agent or a real estate investor who's just trying to keep track of their sphere of influence, their database of leads. You can automate so much stuff through a CRM, and we've talked about how automating processes can help you leverage your time and expand your capacity. So I'd love to hear your take on CRMs, which one to use, which ones work, what works for different types of people. And
this will be a short
CRM
conversation.
101.
This will be a short conversation. I'll tell you why. So I'm a huge CRM guy. I love CRMs. I geek out on CRMs.
I figured.
One of my favorites has always been Zoho because it's cheap and you can customize it so much. I've built Zoho CRMs for clients and things like that. I have a sales background,
Is that ZOJO or
ZOHO? It's basically the poor man's Salesforce. So it looks just like Salesforce. Kind of like the old Act. Act was like the first CRM. Like I can really geek out on this stuff. I get into the history of CRMs. It's sad. I like business. So, I've always been a CRM person. I didn't know how you could operate without one, just with my sales background. When I got into coaching real estate, I realized, wow, CRMs are really making it hard for agents. They're not really unless they had a sales background or they had used one before, they weren't really, it wasn't really helping a lot of them, and they just weren't using it. And CRMs only work when you have to work through them. You have to work through them. It can't be a nice to have. It can't be an occasional go-to. It has to be your daily operating system. It has to be your dashboard. That's why I like them, because I think entrepreneurs should have a dashboard. All that said, I'm probably the worst guest you could ever have for getting sponsors and ads, because I'm going to talk against every other program that's out there. I'm so sorry. But I recommend that all of my clients use the same CRM, which is Microsoft Excel. And what I tell them to do, and this is agents doing if you're an agent under 6 million sold a year, this works. Anything above that, you need to have a CRM. And my recommendation for you would be whichever one looks nicest to you. I really don't care. Just take the time, put the time on your calendar, take a week off and learn how to use it. Go fly out to their class if you have to, if you're not going to watch their online video. Do what you have to do to learn the stupid thing, and then you have to operate in it every single day. So there's a lot of great ones. There's some real estate specific ones that are really good for you because they're real estate specific. And so even though they don't have half the bells and whistles, all the stuff I would want, you should probably use that if you're not familiar with CRMs, because you're going to have to apply a system to the real estate industry. I know how to do that, but I designed them, right? So most people should only go to a real estate specific one. That said, I said Excel. This is how you would design it. You simply take all of the potential prospects you have that you have a DDT with, a day, date, and time with. And they go at the top of the spreadsheet, and you highlight them all green because they're appointments. Even if it's just an appointment to talk again, even if it's just your standing DDT, you have that appointment with them. If you're just tuning in now, DDT was talked about earlier. You have to listen to the whole podcast. You can't fall asleep. So All of them are in green. All of them that are in yellow are people you want to follow up with, you want to have an appointment with, you felt optimistic about, but you don't have a DDT. They go in yellow. Everyone you've talked to and they're a no for now, meaning they're not going to do anything in real estate in the next year. They go at the bottom of the spreadsheet, they're in gray. All of the gray people end up on a drip campaign, regular automated email campaign to try to get them back engaged, offering them stuff, giving them helpful content, triggering buying windows. Okay. Everyone in yellow, you're calling every single week. Those are the phone calls you have to make. Why? Because you didn't get the DDT. And we're going to try to push them into gray. We're going to push them into green. Hopefully this is making sense. I'm not drawing it on a calendar.
No,
or on a board.
I'm following along. Yeah. Hopefully,
all of
hopefully
the green. What do you do? Well, you work them.
Make your
That's your sales. That's your sales pipeline. So what do I do with the rest of my time? Well, you're not going to ignore follow-up that you would have ignored in any other system. You're going to focus on your lead generation. And what are you going to do with them? Try to get them into the green, or they're going to end up on the yellow. And all we're doing every week in our sales block that we've set aside of 2 hours of calls every week, all we're doing is calling yellows.
Yeah, it's so simple. And
simple.
all you need is a name, a phone number, and an email address.
If you have 100 people, you don't need a CRM. You need a spreadsheet.
Right.
You go, well, Tom, I've got 500. Have you ever followed this program to weed them out? No. Put them all in a spreadsheet. Let's get them into the categories.
Color code them and then work them.
And if you don't have at least 100 yellow, you don't need a CRM.
Right. But the beauty of it is when you do grow, when you have a 500, 1,000, whatever that number is for you, you just import your spreadsheet into your CRM and you don't even miss a beat.
And, well, where do I keep all my contact info? In your phone, where it should be. And if your CRM isn't synced with your phone, you're missing the whole glory of this whole thing. What's so cool is when I get a call, my CRM tells me who they are, opens up their pipeline, and has the notes ready to go. So after the call, I put the notes in and I hit enter. I mean, but that's salespeople that are dealing with constant incoming. Most agents don't have that level of incoming traffic that they need a CRM. We remember people. We put them in our phone and we're good, but that's not tracking our pipeline.
Yes, but, and this is what I have found. This is my personal experience. Back in the old days, BC.
You were allowed to disagree with me violently.
No, I'm not disagreeing, but back in the old days, BC, before COVID,
yeah,
there was a lot more face-to-face interaction. If I sit down with somebody in my office, at my desk, at the conference table, and we have a 30-minute conversation, to me, that cements them more in my memory the next time they call.
Absolutely.
I know who this person. Oh, yeah, I remember. Yeah, of course I remember. If I do 30 minutes on Zoom with somebody, for me, it doesn't cement the same. And it's easy to forget what we talked about and forget that person's, details as far as what are they looking for, what was their backstory, what did we discuss last time. So as we move more and more to this online communication, Zoom and Google Meet and all these platforms, they're great for making communication easy. But I think they also require you to take some notes. And so, again, all the more reason, and you can put a column in your spreadsheet for comments or notes, but all the more reason to leverage a CRM. And they're not expensive. Sure. It goes by the number of contacts that you have. So if you only have a couple hundred contacts, a CRM is going to cost you $20 a month or something like that.
Yeah, and most of them are free. I mean,
they start out free.
HubSpot's free CRM is great. And it will connect all your social media in a really good way. And I think that for most real estate agents, they need to really connect their CRM to their social or they won't use it. So a lot of the, what's the one big one for real estate? Something agent.
Wise Agent?
Wise Agent's one. There's a couple like that that I've always been impressed with because I felt like agents were more likely to use them because they immediately did real estate stuff. Where if you're using like Copper or Salesforce or Zoho or something like that, you may or may not be able to apply it the same way. You are task oriented. Most agents are people oriented, not as much task oriented. So like the way you just described how you do I would definitely, Jeff Copeland must have a CRM, but 90% of agents are people or 80% are probably more people oriented. Your investors should have a CRM. But I would say if you're an agent or if you're a broker, you have to have a good one, a really good one. But if you're an agent under 6 million or even above 6 million, over 6 million, you definitely need one. If you're under 4, I would probably put you in Excel and see how you do. unless you're task oriented.
But I think the big difference when you move up from Excel to a real CRM is the automation tools. The
my
drip
gosh,
campaigns.
There's no comparison.
You can automatically send out postcards and follow up. There's so many things you can do inside a CRM that you spend a couple hours setting it up once, and then it works behind the scenes and saves you 10 minutes a day for the rest of your life.
Yes.
And that's the real way to leverage a CRM. And so if you don't have one, if you don't know what the letters mean, like I did a few minutes ago, do some research, look into a CRM, because it can absolutely sort of skyrocket you to that next level if you're on a plateau or whatever.
Yeah, Zoho is a great one. It's like same with accounting. Like, I don't understand how people do business without QuickBooks. Like, there's other alternatives out there, but I don't understand how people do it. Like, there's just some tools that you just kind of need to have. You probably need a PO box. You probably need, things like that. But for a lot of folks in real estate, I want to see how you're operating, how task oriented you are, how much you're going to leverage this. Because if every week I'm trying to get you to do data entry instead of actually doing what you're good at, it can be a problem. So, but it becomes a necessity eventually.
So this is a little bit off script, but it not that we have a script, we're just talking, but we did have kind of an outline.
Yeah.
But you mentioned data entry, and I hear there's the buzzword right now is VA, virtual assistant. You got to get a virtual assistant because these people in the Philippines or whatever will work for $2 an hour or whatever the number is. But when it comes to data entry or just admin clerical tasks, do you see a lot of people in real estate having success using a virtual assistant to take some of this administrative burden off their plate?
Yeah. Do I see them having success using a virtual assistant? No. Do I see them doing it in droves? All entrepreneurs. It's like, that's why virtual assistants target entrepreneurs who don't need them. They do. Their marketing plan is like, find the entrepreneur who's never, made a six-figure income, and let's get them to think that they need to hire us and what we're going to do for them. And this, when you get into business and you start coming up and making some money, it's amazing where all this help comes from that you didn't really need. It's costing you money, and it feels good. I heard one speaker one time say, until you're making $250,000 a year, don't consider a virtual assistant. Well, I think that kind of depends. I've used them, had many clients use them. I've recommended that clients use them on occasion. You will have a successful relationship with a virtual assistant out the gate if you have a very clear task-oriented task that you can hand them day one. So what I mean is, if you're doing data entry, if you're packing envelopes, it doesn't even have to be manual labor. If your phone is ringing off the hook, if you do need stuff in the CRM, if you do need transaction coordinator help, if you do need all that stuff, there is probably an assistant for you. But it has to be something like, I do these things, I don't want to do them anymore. It's transferable to the virtual assistant without them having your expertise, and they'll actually do a better job at it because it wasn't your unique ability. In those cases, get one. You have to pass that litmus test.
Well, what I'm hearing you say is you have to sit down and do the hard work of developing a very specific process, checklist, and step order of operations for this task that you want to hire somebody else to do. Otherwise, how would they ever possibly do it? So unless you take the time to build out the workflow, a virtual assistant is just going to spin their wheels. And so if you want to do the legwork, you can offload some of this stuff that you're not good at or you don't like doing. But you have to put in the time on the front end.
Most people are better off with a business partner. And it doesn't mean that you have a financial business partnership. It could simply mean a wingman that you kind of work with. Like, let's face it, like I like working alone. I don't really want anyone else on my team sometimes. I really like the freedom that brings. I like kind of being the independent guy. And you were the same way. I remember when we first met, we were talking about brokerages and different things like that. You were really independent steaming. And so, maybe it doesn't apply to guys like you and me, but I've made the recommendation to a lot of people that, let me go back to what I was going to say. But the fact of the matter is, if you and I came together into this office every single week and we just had a meeting, even if we're not even financially together, if we're just like, okay, we're just going to talk about what we're going to do this week, and we're going to map it off together. I'd be playing off of you. You'd be playing off of me. It'd be a lot of energy, be accountability to what we said. We'd be talking about it, be working together. There's probably things you're good at, I'm bad at, things I'm bad at, you're good at. We could maybe share some of that stuff, figure out a way to make it work out. It's usually kind of finding that peanut butter jelly relationship that's a lot better It doesn't have to be business partnerships, though. You can actually just do it by sharing an office with someone and doing it. I find that is usually better for people that are struggling with consistency or growth than hiring an employee that you have to manage, especially if you didn't want to work with someone else.
Yeah, or if maybe you're not good at managing employees in the first place, just hiring a virtual assistant isn't gonna do you a lot of good.
If you're hiring a virtual assistant because you're overwhelmed, you're not making the right decision. You have to know, you need to understand that, let's say you were someone else and you could take what you did and you could put it into processes, and great virtual assistant organizations know that. Like, they'll show up and they'll do an analysis to figure out how they can just do what I just said. How can they make something a process? But sometimes, unfortunately, they don't say no to the business, or you meet someone you like, they've promised you the sun, moon, and stars, their optimism is just enticing, they believe themselves, and it ends up just being a mess in the end, unfortunately, more often than not.
No, I love your point of, hey, just find a work buddy.
I feel like I'm pooping on everything you send me today. Like, none of it works.
No, not at all.
Quit everything.
I actually
Get
love what you said
now.
about, hey, don't spend money on a virtual assistant. Just find a buddy in work who you can bounce ideas off of, or maybe divvy up some responsibilities, or just bounce ideas off of. And I love the way you put it. If you're peanut butter, find your jelly.
Yeah.
And if you're jelly, find your peanut butter.
It's really helpful that you can get along with. It's your work wife, your work husband. Like, it's those, like, going back to where I started off in the other consulting firm. Him and I worked so well together. We gelled so well. We were better together than we were apart, because there was just those unique abilities were shared just right, and we kept each other accountable. For a lot of entrepreneurs, a virtual assistant is not going to hold you accountable. You're their boss. You're the one that holds their paycheck. And that's how it was with my virtual assistant.
It's one more thing for you to manage, one more task for you to stay on top of. Absolutely.
Yeah, they don't tend to take initiative.
So it's no secret that real estate is a team sport. One of the things that every real estate investor is either taught or figures out the hard way is you have to build a team. As an investor or as an agent, you're going to need, in the case of an investor or real estate agent, you're going to need to find a property manager, a CPA, a title company, an attorney, an insurance person, a home inspector, a 1031 qualified intermediary. Which, by the way, that's why we bring all of these different professionals on our podcast, is to introduce them to our clients. But you have to build out this team. And so I find it interesting that some of your focus areas are hiring and onboarding, team building, and leadership development. Now, and I'm sure a lot of people are sitting at home listening, or wherever they are listening, and thinking, well, I'm not really hiring and firing anyone. I'm not a leader of anything. I'm just the lone wolf real estate agent, or I'm just the real estate investor trying to find the property. I'm not leading anything. But I don't think that's true. I think everybody has to hire, fire, onboard, and lead. So I think that could be an important mindset shift for a lot of people, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, probably like all the others. It's probably a little bit of a negative opinion today. Once again, I'm in a great mood. I'm a very positive person, very optimistic about the future. But for a lot of the brokers I sit down with, and they say, "Hey, I heard you help brokerages grow teams," and I do. First thing we have to figure out is what kind of broker do you want to be? You already have a team. Usually, a lot of times I'll sit down with brokers. I'll have a team of 20, 6 are active, 2 are actually making the thing money, and they may be emotional and difficult to deal with. They can demand a lot of attention because they're making all this money. But they're all very different, and they all need to be coached in very different ways. And they'll say, well, what can we do to grow the team? Again, decide what kind of brokerage you want. Well, I already know. No, we really need to decide what kind of people are we going to attract, and why are we going to attract them here? And when it comes to building your team, I like the way you look at it, because you look at things through the lens of strategic partnerships. I think the most important thing, anyone in real estate, doesn't really matter what area of real estate they're in, is you really need to have that strategic partnership. That's why Pinellas Realtor Organization is just the best affiliates group I've ever worked with. And I'm not saying that other ones are bad. They're all great, but they're especially great at building that team. Pro is very good at this. The brokers, they have a pro broker orientation. I actually talk about this topic. I talk about how to grow and develop a team. We go through the basics of that for a few hours for their orientation. It's like once a quarter. If you're a member of Pro and you're a broker you've never attended, you definitely should. I don't know if I'm definitely not answering your question, but
No, you're getting there.
The mindset shift is so true. I guess what I'm trying to get to is, when I sit down with people, I say everybody needs to have the strategic partnerships. Nobody can get to where they need to be without that. But when it comes to bringing those in-house, like you're their manager, I'm going to recommend that most people in real estate don't do that unless they really are good at managing people. Don't decide to hire people for the money. Well, if a transaction coordinator, I look at those are vendors, they're 1099 relationships. I'm talking about someone's going to come in as a W-2. Don't do it because you think they're going to make you money. You need to be a person who wants to manage, who can manage, who understands that this is going to be a person I'm responsible for. They're not just helping me do something, I'm helping them do something. We got to stop looking at W-2s as 1099. And real estate is particularly susceptible to this because we have so many strategic partnerships, because we're so entrepreneurial. We kind of treat everyone else like their own business. W-2 relationship should be approached more maturely than that, I think. And so I recommend to a lot of brokers, I've told them, I don't think you should do leadership training here. I don't think we should grow your brokerage unless you have a broker manager, because you're never going to be it. You're not a coach. You're not a mentor. You're doing this for the money. You've got a certain scale. If you don't hit, it's not going to work. And you're wondering what you can do. And I'm saying pour into people, and you're like, okay. But people aren't going to want you to pour into them. They're not going to do what you ask them to do. You're going to give up on them. You're not motivated for seeing other people win. So you shouldn't be in charge of a team. You don't have that leadership spirit, which is oftentimes sacrificial. You've got a utilitarian spirit. You just want to make money. You're trying to find a program that's going to do that. And for a lot of folks, hiring employees that's not the best bet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But I'm also
I didn't
thinking.
Answer your question though.
No, I think you did. But but the other thing that I envision is the real estate investor who's sitting in Minnesota or whatever today, listening, and they're thinking, well, I want to buy properties in Florida, so I have to build my team. You may not be the leader of the organization, but you become the ringleader of your team, because you need a real estate agent, you need a property manager, you might need an attorney, and
Sure.
A lot of these vendors may be remote because you're in Minnesota, we're in Florida. But I think, here's what comes to mind. I was on the phone the other day with somebody who was interested in property management, and I was answering their questions and explaining what we do on the property management side. And at one point, the person said, I'm really sorry. I mean, I know this sounds like an interview. And I thought to myself, well, of course it is. You should be interviewing your property manager. You're in sort of that, relationship where you're the leader or the owner of the property, and you're hiring a service provider. So why would you apologize for interviewing and asking these crucial questions? And so, that's kind of where I was thinking in terms of, for a real estate investor, you have to build this team, and it's so important that your team is sort of synergistic. They work well together. They work well with you. And I think of it a lot from the property management side, because we do a lot of that. And there's some owners that we kind of know, hey, they're a great fit for us. They're going to be hands off. They're out of state. They just want us to be the boots on the ground and truly manage their property.
Right.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got people who are really needy. I need to talk to somebody every day. Tell me what's going on with my property.
Yeah.
Did the grass get cut yesterday? And we don't have the capacity to get down into that level of detail with people. We need the people who are a little more hands off, and not that we don't take care of those things, but I just can't report back to you every time the grass gets cut. And so I think more from a team building and team development standpoint, I think that it's more applicable to real estate investors than you might think at first glance.
Yeah, so many tangents potential there. Property management throws a big rock into this pool to cause lots of ripples, because that's my background too. I got out of the military, went right into property management, large scale multifamily stuff, real estate investment trust stuff, and I learned a ton there. I was really glad to come out of the military into that, because I had to wear a different hat every day in the military. I had to wear a different hat every day in large multifamily. Learned a ton about real estate, learned a ton about business and accounting and property management, and I love all that. I'm so glad I have those skills. I loved the industry because it was so different every day. When you're hiring a property manager, property managers need to know what they're like, how they want to operate, what their systems are going to be, how they work best, and therefore they'll know who they work best with. And what property managers need to stop doing to one another is taking everyone that calls them. Sure. Like, look, if someone calls you up and they go, oh, you're in Florida, we want to give you 100 doors. And he gets so excited. And then, like you said, they want to know when the grass is cut 100 times a week. That may not work for you. Sure. It may be exactly what you were called to do. And there's plenty of business to go around if we could just learn how to operate within that. But we're always gonna stretch. We're always gonna compete. And I understand. Going back to hiring, when you hire someone to fill a gap that you're not good at, But now they're representing you. It's not like they're a strategic partner. They're not just doing the service for you, but they're doing that service for your clients, and you don't have any mastery there. You do need to understand how to manage there. And that's first task and second people. You need to know generally how that role is going to function. I think what a lot of smaller investment firms do is they don't really know how the role is going to function, but they find a person who's done it before and has some ideas about it. They seem to get along with them and they seem to be impressed, and so they go ahead and bring them in. And that is oftentimes horribly catastrophic. That goes against what I was talking about before with like you and I working together. You really need to vet that. And that is actually a service I do for people. So it's kind of like premarital counseling. And what I do in those, it's one of my favorite contracts to do. It's pretty administratively heavy for me. But what I will do is I'll have several sets of meetings, and I get people talking about core values right up front. I get them talking about goals and ambitions. I'm talking about short game, long game. And what I end up doing with them is I build structure, how this relationship is going to work. I don't care about the money. I just want to know how the structure is going to work, how they're going to interact, how they're going to do that ahead of time. So there's some rules to play by. And I find that a lot of folks need a lot of help in that area.
Absolutely. I could see why, because it's so difficult sometimes to manage expectations on the real estate side, the property management side. We kind of know how we operate. We know what the process is. But if the investor who owns the property is sitting in Chicago, they know nothing about us, and we don't have that level of trust. They need to understand the process and understand how the system works. Otherwise, they're kind of blind, and that makes them really uncomfortable. So yeah, I could see where building out that process ahead of time so that both parties have clearer expectations would make things run a lot more smoothly.
Yeah, and just real quick to make sure I do answer some of your questions here. It's really hard to get small business folks to respect sometimes the how important properly onboarding any employee is. I don't care if it's a 1099 real estate agent and they're kind of independent steaming. Have you assessed what they came to you for? Have you properly onboarded them so they can be successful at that? Do you have a management program in place that's going to help them achieve that? And is it effective? Is it tried and true? And if you're really just going to be hands off, are you upfront about that? Are you saying something else? The onboarding component is more important than the hiring component. The post onboarding management is also critical. And there's no hire and forget. There's fire and forget in the military. There's no hire and forget in this industry. And it's traditionally been such a hands-off industry. It's entrepreneurs working with we treat everyone like a 1099, strategic alliances. And when we start talking about hiring in real estate, I get real nervous because I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if we really are thinking through what we need to think through with that. But again, as a leadership trainer, maybe I'm bringing a little bit heavier hand to that because my expectations may be a little bit different, but I feel very much that people need to be responsible for the people they hire. Onboard them, prepare them, manage them, be ready to make all that investment, and understand that if you can't make that worthwhile, you probably shouldn't be hiring.
Yeah, that's a great point because we don't really talk a lot about hiring real estate agents because they're 1099s, right. They're independent contractors. But I'll be the first one to tell you that if you just got your real estate license and you haven't practiced real estate, you didn't learn anything in real estate school about how to do a real estate transaction. Yeah. And so it falls upon your broker to teach you, okay, welcome through the door from real estate school, but here's how you fill out an offer. Here's how you submit the offer. Here's the paperwork that you need. Here are the things that you need to do for the buyer or the seller that you're representing.
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot of brokers out there that don't do that. They just let people figure it out on their own, and that's where a lot of these bad habits come from.
Yeah, three types of brokerages I like to say. You've got the brokerage that is going to just leave you alone, let you go. You've got the brokerage that's probably smaller, more boutique, probably tells you they're going to do a lot of stuff, but they're going to do as much as they can do when the broker's free to do it. Like they probably have all the right intentions, and they will train you and they will help you, but they're probably just scattered, it just kind of depends. Some people are getting the help they need, some people aren't. Those are typically the people I work with. And then you've got the large brokers who have made a business out of selling you that help. So they'll hire anybody. They'll bring anybody into the brokerage, and they'll give you all the training you need, all the programs, and all the resources. It's just going to cost you significant coin because that's their business.
Sure.
You're their customer. And they're my biggest competitors.
Cool. Yeah, and if you're an agent, you got to do your research on these business models and make sure you understand what you're getting.
Yeah.
So that brings us to kind of our closing questions, and I ask these, excuse me, I ask these of everyone, and I'm always fascinated by the different perspectives. The first one is, where do you see the Tampa Bay real estate market going in the next few years, 2 to 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I see it all going to Pasco County. He laughs. This is prophetic.
No, that is a good point. That
all
as
going to
the,
Pasco.
As the urban cores get
We're
more
all
built
going.
out, the surrounding counties are certainly seeing substantial growth.
Pasco County will become. I don't know if you how long have you lived here?
This time since 96. So,
Okay. All right.
25 years.
So, like I grew up in Pinellas, and when Palm Harbor started blowing up, like everybody moved to Palm Harbor. Like obviously, all the homes were still fine everywhere else. And you saw St. Pete's had a lot of movement, things like that. What's happening in Pasco is doing that Palm Harbor effect that we had on Pinellas and Largo and Clearwater. That's going to do it to both counties. It's even doing it to Brandon. It's even doing it to counties north of them. They're all coming to State Road 54. And I think you're going to see State Road 54, State Road 52. That's where the whole market's going to go. All the businesses are going to go up there. The work from home market's going to affect that. So, and everything else that comes available anywhere else is just going to be bought up by people who want to flip them into rentals.
Interesting. That's not a perspective that I had heard anyone mention before.
Could be totally off.
But we are seeing, the growth, the expansion, move out to these surrounding
My
counties.
focus is Pasco right now.
And then my final question, you already pointed out that you already answered, but I do want to ask it again and kind of remind everybody.
Yeah, I'll give you a different answer.
Okay, even better. So one tip, trick, or tool that you would share with an aspiring real estate investor or real estate agent, something that you wish you had known 10 or 20 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, and before I said stay the course, that's don't let your creativity get ahead of you. Put it in the lab, and that was my original answer to that. And along that, I would say don't let your optimism fool you. So optimism is and dreaming is the driving force for a lot of us. I would never want a day to go by that I didn't get some chance to look forward to the future. It is it's the drive for me every day. And but what I've learned is that I'm much better when I operate from a place of contentment. So if you've got tons of ambition and optimism and you're motivated and you're ready to go, you're probably not even listening to the call at this point because you've already heard everything you wanted to hear and you're just going to read the show notes. But if you're one of those people like me, I would say find contentment first. Be okay with where you're at now. Don't let your ambition ever be led by a dissatisfaction with where you are. And I know that it is the opposite from what a lot of people, not everyone's motivated that way. That could be negative to some. But I think for most people, we are much better off operating from a place of contentment. The ability to say no, the ability to reprioritize at the drop of a hat. Guys that are driven, I say guys, I'm just blaming guys. But for many of us, it's like we get so excited about what we think we can do. And we get so focused on it, so intent on it, that we get halfway down the field and we just start learning our lessons. So why'd you do that? Why don't you change? Well, what about getting back to the family or getting back to these other things? And it's so hard to get back because you jumped off the boat to chase something shiny in the water. And you don't do that when you're coming from a place of contentment. You think wiser, you think through things, you slow down, you're happier, you're more well adjusted, and you're able to be more consistent. And it's been the hardest thing for me to learn, and I'm so glad I did. Did it dampen my ambitions? A little bit. I don't care at all.
I think that's a fascinating perspective because, you mentioned the property management situation where somebody's going to have you take on 100 doors.
Yeah.
Sometimes it might be the $1 million listing. And the ambitious part of us wants that. We want to do that. We want that growth. We want that paycheck, whatever the case may be. But just because you can get those 100 doors or you can get that $1 million listing doesn't always mean that you should.
Every single decision has a sacrifice.
And sometimes the best bullet is the one that you dodged. And it takes a while to arrive at that point where you just know going in, like this is not going to be a good fit. I should not take on this client. I should not take this listing. I should not take this property management account. Because it's just not going to end well. And you kind of get that gut feeling, but it takes a lot of, courage to say, you know what, I'm going to pass. I don't think this is right for us at this time.
Optimism is a drug. Optimism has an ability to shield us from pain that we may about to experience. It's very good for that. But with too much of it, we can become the type of people that don't feel anything at all. And then when we didn't have the pain indicators and now we need to change and it's too late. I see it all the time with clients. They tell me all their ambitions and all their dreams and they're super excited and super passionate and I'm motivated to help them. I can't wait. And I go, how was your family life like? Oof, you could probably help me there first. You're not near as passionate. You're not near as inspired. Matter of fact, you didn't want to talk about that at all, but you need to. You know what? Did you sort out how important that is to you? How much you're willing to be given there before I help you ruin your marriage? Honestly, as a coach, the reason why I don't get a lot of people is because I'm not willing to ruin people's lives by helping them win.
Well, you're probably one of the most realistic coaches I've ever met. So,
yeah. Oh, to me, life is a lot more than success.
There's a lot of people out there that'll just give you the hoorah speech and say, "Well, if you change your mindset, you'll change everything." But it takes a little more than that. It takes a lot of hard work.
My dad once told me, he was like, apparently he read an article somewhere. It said like people that make, this was many years ago, so I don't know what the numbers are now with inflation or whatever, but it was like people that make between $70,000 and $90,000 are the happiest, most content people. They have enough money that they can get what they want, but not too much money where they get involved in things that take all their time and complicate things or whatever. And I don't know if that's necessarily true for everybody, but for me, I will say that what does ring true from that, why I remember that so much is, if you don't know who you want to be and what your life should really look like, that if it was your last day, you'd be happy with it. If you don't know that, then you've got selfish ambition. You don't have good ambition. You've got a lot of worldly ambition, and that has certainly has its payday. But you don't really have any ambition that's really going to satisfy. So what happens is your appetite grows, but your contentment never does. But if you can find contentment now, and I'm not like some Buddhist or something, like trying to say like, find your peace now. Like, no, I'm actually a Christian, but I would say contentment is key to entrepreneurial success. And if you're just hustling really, really, really hard trying to get there and you don't really know what there is, you may arrive and find out it's not where you wanted to be, and you look back at the wreckage. And so I always start my clients off with doing prioritization exercises. I'm not a life coach, but I start with some of that stuff because I don't want to help you win in the wrong categories.
Sure. And I think that's a great point to sort of close on, that it's possible to be content and ambitious.
Yes.
The two are not mutually exclusive.
It's the best place to be.
Absolutely. And so, Thom, thank you so much for being here today. People can find more information about you and your programs at strongholdtraining.com.
You can book a call with me there for 15 minutes. That's 15-minute free call. Calendly, I don't think I use Calendly, but I use something in there that does all that automation you were talking about. So if you want to book a call with me and you don't know, I don't know what Thom does, I don't know if he can help me, I don't know, let's have a 15-minute call. In 15 minutes I might be able to help you.
Yeah, 15 minutes well spent.
Yeah, I don't answer any question in less than 20, so you're always going to get bonus minutes.
Well, hey, thanks so much for being on. This was outstanding,
Fun.
and look forward to doing it again someday.
Yeah, thanks. A lot of fun.